Hello and welcome back to Sharks Happen. On today's episode we are going to go over attacks on a swimmer, attack on a surfer, an attack on people just standing in the water. We'll finish out the show with You Don't Hear That Every Day, and I'll have a little story for the end of the show. I hope you stick around. It's going to be a great show. Okay, now we're going to start out the show over at Cure Beach, and that is with a K, so K-U-R-E Beach, and that's in North Carolina. And the date is August 17th of 2011. Trang Aronian, she is in her young 20s. They don't specify how young. She's with her husband. They're at the beach, and it's about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're both standing 15 feet offshore. And they're in 4 to 5 feet deep water, standing side by side, just standing there. And a shark comes up and grabs Trang's, I believe it's her left foot, grabs the top of it and the sides of it and shakes a couple times and then just swims off. Her husband gets her into shore, they take her in, she ends up getting stitched up. It ends up being 60 stitches to close up her wounds. And they say that they think this might be a sand tiger, which would mean holes, not cuts. You know, it's spiky little teeth and not blades. Also, it would mean like tearing when it shakes instead of like a clean cut. That probably is not pleasant just thinking about it, but you know, they don't have the knife like to cut through things, so if they're going to shake, it's going to be a tear. So I never thought about that until I just thought about this thing here with one of those ragged tooth sharks, I guess you would call them. So they say that they think this was 5 or 6 feet. It's not going to go into our books, but I wanted to cover it just because it was interesting to me that, you know, shook its head. And that they, you know, I think that if it didn't shake its head, they would have plainly seen that it was a ragged tooth shark, that it was holes, not slices. But the fact that it shook probably made it a little bit more difficult for them to discern exactly what it was. So I wanted to go over that one, and that's Trang Aronian. It would go down as an attack, not an attempt to predate, but too small of a shark, 5 to 6 feet. I'm thinking probably 5. Okay, now we're going to head over to South Australia. We're going to D'Estrées Bay, and that is on Kangaroo Island, and the date is December 6th of 2020. Dion Lynch, he's 29 years old, and he is out doing some surfing. This attack happens as he's surfing between 1:30 and 2:30 in the afternoon. Doesn't say how far from shore, depth of the water, but it does say he's sitting on his board, and as you see in this clip, when you're sitting on your board, half your body's in the water. You're very low into the water, even though you're sitting on the board. You're actually sitting down in the water with the board. I think we went over that back on the episode where I went over sharks, what they see when they come up on surfers. But anyway, so he's sitting there, and all of a sudden he says he felt like a train hit him in the back, like a truck. And he says he looked over over his left side, because that's where the pain was, and he got a glimpse of the great white hanging on his back. And it let go as soon as he looked, and then went on its way. He ends up paddling his way in. He walks 300 meters. So you're talking 280 yards, a good eighth of a mile, maybe even less than that, maybe close between an eighth and a quarter of a mile. But it's a long way to walk when you've been bitten in the back by a great white shark, in my opinion. So that's the attack. He ends up surviving the attack. That doesn't say anything about any major, you know, tendons or nerve damage, long-term effects like that you would have, that we usually get into in a lot of these attacks. So he gets off being able to survive an attack by not only getting attacked and bitten in the back by the shark, paddling his way to shore from however far out he was, and then walking 300 meters to go get help. So that's the story of Dion Lynch, an attack, not an attempt to predate by a great white shark. We were just not sure what size. Okay, now we're going to head over to Sai-wah, and that is over in Hong Kong, and the date is June 1st of 1993. Yan Sang-wei, he is 42 years old. He was out doing some swimming at this popular beach. There's very little details, just says he was out there bathing and he was attacked by a shark. He screamed for help. He was rescued. They brought him to the beach, but his leg was severed. It sounds like the whole leg was gone. And by the time they got him to the hospital, he had passed away. They closed off the beaches. There's no telling of what shark this was, but I believe we've covered at least one or two attacks over at Hong Kong before, and it was a great white. Possibly a great white here, possibly another large shark that visits those waters. If they have, you know, a bull or even a tiger in the area, that could happen, but I'm not sure where they are as far as the equator to be able to judge how cold the water is where they're at. So it's an attack, not an attempt to predate by the information we have. It doesn't sound like it did anything but took that leg off and headed on its way, and they were able to get him and get him in. So we go down attack, not an attempt to predate, unfortunately a fatality. We'll move on. Okay, now we're going to head over to the shark attack capital of the world, New Smyrna Beach. And this attack happened on August 29th of 1981. Stephen Drosdick, he is 15 years old and he is out doing some surfing. No telling him how far from shore, but he's pretty close to the beach, at least for surfing, because he finished coming into shore, riding a wave, and fell off of his board. And he says when he came back up to the surface, that's when the shark got him. Shark came in and bit him in the foot, and he grabbed his board and paddled his way back in. Shark bit him once. Doesn't say that it shook him very much. No info on that. Sounds like a bite and let go, but it might have shook a little bit. Released him. He made his way into shore. He says as he's paddling in, he looked back and there was a trail of blood from his foot, and he also had a tendon that was damaged in his lower leg. There were sharks all around in the blood that it was trailing there. So now he's got a bunch of sharks there. He gets himself in. Luckily he was, like I said, in more shallow water than you would be, sitting out there waiting for the wave. He had already taken it in, and he gets in. He gets his injuries repaired, but you know, he has a 6-inch laceration to his ankle and the damage to the lower leg from, you know, they couldn't identify the species, so it's most likely your spinner, black tip, you know, even a hammerhead could do that. Yeah, just any of those kind of sharks. So I would imagine this is too small to put into our books without being identified as a size of a shark. I'm not going to put it in there because the black tips, you know, they barely, when they're the largest, they go over 6 feet. They're probably about 8 feet. Same thing with the spinner. So I would say the majority of these sharks that are biting the people, 6 feet would be pretty much the limit on the size of the sharks that are attacking them. Kind of like the one that jumped in the spinner that knocked that woman off her board and gave her a black eye. Didn't bite her, but spun up, that the traffic camera caught, spun up and knocked her off her board. So that's similar to this. We're not going to put it in the stats. This is what happens when you play around where sharks are always hunting, and that's what New Smyrna Beach is. That's why it is the shark attack capital of the world. Is people are out there in the waves where these black tips and spinners, especially at certain months of the year, they're there hunting the fish that are in those shallows. So those are those accidental bites that, you know, they like to label as misidentification. Shark doesn't think these people's feet are anything other than something there when they're trying to hunt the fish that probably just moved on right by them, and they bite what's there. So it's called accidental to me. So that's what this would be, but we're not going to cover it as far as our stats. Okay, now we're going to head over to Walker's Cay, and that is in the Bahamas. And the date on this is July 4th of 2003. Benjamin Brown, he is 39 years old. He and his 41-year-old brother, Bob. So Bob and Ben, they're out doing some spearfishing. It's about 2:45, just before 3 o'clock, and the pair are about 15 meters offshore. They're in some pretty deep water, being only 50 feet off of the beach, though, or off of rocks, wherever they're located, because this attack happens 20 feet deep. One of the two, I don't remember which one, they went ahead and speared a grouper, a good eating fish. Oh, I love grouper. They speared a grouper, and they were swimming down to get it, and all of a sudden Benjamin felt his left calf grabbed by a shark, and his brother watched it happen. Shark came out of nowhere, bit him not once but twice, and hit on the road. He ends up getting up to the surface, said, I had two good arms and one good leg, I'm going to get up to the surface. Gets on the boat himself without assistance as far as getting to the boat. They probably needed assistance to get on it, I would think. But he gets in. He ended up with some nerve damage to his legs after a 4-hour surgery on that Friday. I think it was after the attack, or that same day Friday, because it said it was Friday. 4-hour surgery then. He might have needed more surgery after that for the nerve damage. So I wasn't able to find any kind of an update in any newspaper articles, any archives on that one. So I'm not sure if he went ahead with the second surgery, but he still had to undergo a 4-hour surgery for this. They said it was about a 7-foot bull shark that hit him. Now here's the thing with this video, and this is why I had to get my my spreadsheet up to date. We've done so many attacks, and I've got so many of them in my head as far as who they are and what they have done, and then I've researched a few hundred ahead of time, and I look at these over and over when I put shows together. So now I'm not sure. I think I've done this attack before, but I couldn't find it in my spreadsheet. That's why I updated my spreadsheet. I can put the name in there, and if it doesn't copy it, I don't have it in the spreadsheet. But this is so identical to another attack, maybe 2 that I've done. I'm not sure that if I've even done this one before. So if I have, I apologize, but that was the attack. Like I said, 7-foot bull shark, and it's one of those, it's a lot closer to the shore than normal. But again, you're in deep water, you're not in the shallows, and shark hit him once, biting him twice in that split second, and then hit on its way without anybody having to do anything with it. And this is kind of becoming an MO with these bull sharks, with people that are not along the shores or not along a jetty, which we'll talk about a jetty at the end of the show, because there's an attack we got to go over that just happened on a woman. We'll just talk about it a little bit. So I just wanted to throw that in there to explain, if you ever see that one of these are in a show before, they're not in the spreadsheet, and that's how it ends up in the show again, because now I got too many attacks in my head to keep track of which ones I've done and which ones I'm reviewing. We'll move on. Okay, we'll finish out our unprovoked attacks over at Congy Beach, and that is in New South Wales, Australia. The date, February 11th, 2003. Tom Plumridge, he is 24 years old, and he is out doing some swimming. They don't say the time of day or the depth of the water. He does say that it was fairly close to shore, so we know that he wasn't far from the shore when this happened. He's swimming along, and he touched something with his hand. Oh, this one creeps me out. That creeps me out. People bumped, people touching things, people seeing something by them. No, no. That's all why I choose land. So he feels something with his hand, and he said he felt it, and seconds later this thing went for him. It bit him in the leg, it bit him in the buttocks, it bit him in the, I believe it was the arm. No, the lower back. So he had bites. It bit him like the lower legs and then up to his buttocks and lower back. It sounds like 3 bites. They said that they're not sure what kind of shark it was. They think maybe a sand tiger, and if it was a sand tiger, that's kind of odd for it to go after somebody that many times, to do multiple bites like that. We don't run into that a lot. It's usually a bite and a quick shake, or not. And do they say a sand tiger in there? Yeah, they say it's a gray nurse shark. So that's just surprising to me, to see a multiple bite thing like that. And then it makes you wonder, would that shark have bit him had he not touched it while he was swimming? You know, you see that with people paddling on their boards, and they almost touch a shark, a great white over there off, when they're doing those drone footage, and the shark leaves them alone. And I would think with the great white, even touching it like that, it's not going to be bothered with you, because it already knows you're there. But in this case, you wonder if the shark even, was there for that guy, if it was hunting for its food, and when he touched it, that was just something that just triggered the attack. We'll never know, but interesting there. I also want to bring up the first 2 attacks that we went over. The first one was 58% humidity. The next one, I believe, was 60 or 64% humidity. So again, we're above 50% humidity on most of these attacks, and I'm still going to be paying attention for when we have one fall into that slot between the 50s and the 20s that we end up having in our spreadsheet. We'll move on to the end of the show. On the shark attack recently on the surfer over in Australia, there was a fatality. I brought up that what I read was he and his board were taken under the water, and his board popped up, and then the shark came up and did a swim around so that the beach goers could see him. I said it was a Lloyd Skinner, pulled a Lloyd Skinner. I forget that most of my early viewers are probably long gone by now, and most of you are probably new and haven't been through the whole progression of the channel. So I'm bringing up things that I think everybody knows, and you're probably not aware of all the attacks that we've gone over. And I do this a lot where I'm going to compare an attack that I go over, and like that one where that surfer was attacked, even though we haven't gone over it yet, it already reminds me of Lloyd Skinner, just what I know of it. Other than Lloyd Skinner was swimming and this guy was a surfer. So I wanted to bring that up. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is I went into my old search app again, just checking out what's going on in there. Couldn't see much going on different than the last time. There was just an attack on a woman. Ali sent me this attack, thank you Ali, over in, I believe, Australia again, and this was off of a jetty, but again, we would call this a pier here in the US. It's more a pier than a jetty. It looks like it's wooden, and it goes out pretty far into the water. And this woman apparently dove into the water. They were pier diving. They call it jetty diving, but they were diving off the pier. And it sounds like her boyfriend was already in the water, because when she jumped into the water, she was almost immediately attacked, kind of like Kabinski, Thaddeus Kabinski, that got attacked in his canal right behind his house when him and his wife got back from doing some grocery shopping. That same type of thing, not quite like the boaters, where it sounds like they might have actually jumped on the shark, which the last one I remember, it was a female, where the husband was shocked. He heard the splash, and mentally he said to himself, that's too big of a splash for my wife. Sure enough, she was being attacked. Probably landed on the shark. Doesn't sound like that's what happened here. This sounds more like the last jetty attack, which was also a pier, where the woman got bit by the 7-foot great white in the ankle. It did the test bite and then bit her in the thigh. Sounds like the same distance, where you just got into the water and you're right by the pier and boom, it bites you. And that's, again, you know, sharks are going to be hunting underneath these bridges and piers. We fish for our fish under docks and things like that, especially crappies we go after. You find a nice dock where they have shelter and they can ambush their prey, that's what they like to do. So I think that just goes to the sharks being hunting at the time. It says, I heard that with this attack in Australia, that the boyfriend pushed the shark away from her after she was bit in the face. So it bit her in the face, which is bad, because it did some pretty major damage, but it also got nerves, and that's just going to be trouble. So you know, dealing with my shoulder nerve for, I think it was 2 months, and depending on how cold it got, it into the 40s, 40 Fahrenheit here, a couple days ago for a few days, and that upset my nerves. So I can tell that the weather can make this thing hurt, even though I don't have any pain when it's not cold out. So that's the attack I had heard about from Ali on the woman over in Australia, which we will go over later on when we get all the information. Okay, now we're going to finish out the show with you don't hear that every day. We're going to head over to Woodstock Beach, I believe it is. Is it Woodstock Beach? Yeah, that's over in South Africa, and this is in 1900. There was Amos Layzell. He and 2 friends, which were 2 privates that were stationed there. The 3 of them go into the water to do some swimming. None of them are good swimmers. So I don't know why you would go in the ocean and swim if you're not a strong swimmer. But anyway, these 3 do. They go out in there and they start swimming. They're only about 40 meters from shore, so about 130 feet from shore. And Amos kind of gets dragged away from them, and they see that he's laying on his back. So they call over to him to swim back to them, and he turns and he tries to swim his way back over there. But again, not a good swimmer. He's not making any progress. So one of his friends strikes out to go get him. He swims out, but only makes it not even halfway there. He can't swim out to him. He's yelling at him, trying to encourage him to swim back in. So Amos is still out there, and now as his friend gets back to shore where his other friend is waiting, there's another gentleman named Henry Skelton, and he runs into the water and he starts swimming out to go save Amos. He gets about halfway to where he needs to go to get Amos, and he disappears below the waves. And I haven't seen anything about this guy. I was looking for anything on the guy that went out to save him, and they don't even mention him again. They don't say that, you know, that that he was never seen again, that they found the body later. They don't say nothing. They just stick with Amos and say that, yeah, Amos, they found Amos's body, and it was shark bitten. They found water in the lungs, and they determined it was a drowning. Now, here's the issue with determining it like that. I can tell you that if you don't have water in the lungs, you probably died of a shark. Or somehow cardiac arrest or something that just ends your life before you get water in your lungs. That's how you're not going to get water in your lungs. But even if you have water in your lungs, doesn't mean you weren't attacked by that shark. It's like that Mark Meeker swimming across Tampa Bay for a beer. He was bet a beer and he was going to swim across Tampa Bay, and I always said this was one of the last 20 years. It's not. It's like 1980s or something. But he was bet a beer and he's swimming across there, and he gets bit in the leg. He gets bit in the calf, kind of like a Eric Ritter bite that he got from the bull shark. Took a piece of his calf. Could be any kind of a little shark, not large. I mean, anything will fit. The hammerhead, the small bull, small whatever, tiger, could take that little piece off him, which is very survivable. He drowned. He drowned because of the shark bite. I mean, the guy was a swimmer that definitely could swim across Tampa Bay. Why you would choose to do it at night for a beer is another story, but that's the situation there. So they don't even bring up Henry Skelton at all. They do bring up that, like I said, the water was in the lungs, and they determined it was a drowning and then shark scavenging. Very possible, and I'll go along with that with him. But what about Henry Skelton? What about the guy that disappeared swimming out there to get him? And the setup for the story also says that for the previous 12 months, that little bay that they were swimming in was huge for shipping. And if you got shipping in there the whole time, you got sharks, and they know that, and they mention that in this story from 1900. So it's more than likely that Henry Skelton was taken by sharks, so I would put him down, and I will put him down as a fatality until I see otherwise, and an attempt and a predation without knowing what kind of shark. And with our boy Amos, we're going to put that thing down as a drowning and a scavenging. And that's the end of the show. After this, we're just going to get into my little story, nothing to do with sharks. So shark people, see you in a couple days when we go over the tiger shark stats. Okay, this will be my my first non-funny story to end the show. Just to tell you, I've said before when I was talking about this nonsense with YouTube, it's just another story. That's all it is. Just another piece of nonsense in my life. So, which I've dealt with enough, so nothing faces me. But anyway, so we have to go back to, I believe it's 1989 or 88. I'm 19 or 20 years old. I work at what is that called? I believe I was working at the archery shop at this time. I was working at a taxidermy shop with Frank before the archery shop. He opened his archery shop. I went to work for him. Frank is my ex-girlfriend and fiance's father. And so it was about 2 years into me dating my ex-girlfriend, and her father was friends with Ted Nugent. And so there's going to be some Ted Nugent stories coming up in the future. But right now, we're going to get into this crazy thing. First of all, Frank is an ex-Detroit cop, and he's a little bit off. I had a blast hanging with the guy, but man, he is just cut from a different cloth. So we're out one night. I believe this is on a weekday. We're doing our archery league at 8 Mile and Drosdick. There was a Starlight Archery, it was called, and we were on the Midnight League, it was called. I think we started around 11:30 and we get done around 1 o'clock. So we shoot that night, and then Frank's going to stand around and talk to all his buddies that he knows, and then we're going to head back to his house. So we get done shooting, it's about 1:30, and we're heading back to his house down Drosdick, and we get to about, it's either 12 Mile or 12.5 Mile, which would be common. And I think it's 12 Mile. There was a Gyros sandwiches place right there, one of those Greek little joints, a little sandwich shop. Open late night, we stopped there and we had a couple sandwiches. They had coffee. I don't drink coffee, can't stand it. Probably because I made so much of it for my mother, pots of coffee every day, that I never wanted anything to do with it again. So we get done with that, and now we're heading back to his house. Now it's 2:30 or almost 3 o'clock in the morning, and my night's about to just begin. This is the only time in my whole life that I've ever really been afraid that I might die. We'll just lead into that, and it's going to happen in the first minute coming up here. We pull up to this light. We get up to 13 miles, so we're heading north, and we get to 13.5 mile, which is Masonic. And it's a small 30-mile-an-hour road going each way off of Drosdick. Now, we have a red light, and there's 3 cars at the red light waiting to go the other way on Drosdick. And I happen to look to the right, and you just know cars that are going way faster than they should be. And this thing was doing at least 60 miles an hour on this 30-mile-an-hour road, and probably faster. And I looked and immediately said, Frank, this guy ain't gonna stop. Frank looked over and he laid on his horn. Now we're in a late 80s Jeep, like a 1989 or 1990 silver Jeep. And he's laying on his horn, letting the people across from him know not to go when the light turns. The first 2 lanes, it's a 3-lane road each way. The first 2 lanes closest to us, they stopped and they saw the guy and they didn't pull out. But that 3rd lane was going to turn right onto Masonic and pulled out the turn. And sure enough, that car hit him about 70 miles an hour. So now Frank's an ex-Detroit cop, so now we're involved in this. His girlfriend is in the back seat of the Jeep. I'm in the front passenger seat. He's driving. He does this left turn. We were in the right lane of the 3 lanes on our side. He does a left turn from that. It's 3 in the morning. Goes over, stops, and makes sure that I think it was a woman that was in the car. I don't even remember what the gender of the person was that was in the car. I know it's one of 2. You know, I'm not one of those. But I don't remember which one it was. I didn't pay attention. As soon as he got the word that it was okay, you could barely see the taillights of that car way up in front of us. He shuts off his lights, his headlights, and we are instantly, as fast as that thing could get up to it, 100 miles an hour for 1.5 miles. Getting up to Hayes, we were doing 100 miles an hour with 0 lights on in a 1989 or 90 Jeep of all things. Anybody pulled out during that situation, they and us are all done. And like I said, that was it right there. That freaked me out like you couldn't believe. That's the only time I can remember being scared for my life. So we get up and that car had turned to the right. So we turn to the right down a side street and we see it way down there and take a left. So he's racing down there and we still have the lights off, but I'm a little less nervous because now we're on side streets and it's 3 in the morning. I'm feeling a little bit better about this. And we get down and we find the car obviously stopped at, there's like a turnaround, a circle. And this guy's letting a friend out at one of his houses. Whether he's letting him out at his house, letting him out near his house, he's going to jump fences, whatever. But Frank ends up getting there and hops out of his car. Now, I'm going to tell you how Frank was dressed. He's in jeans. He's in, you know, a decent looking t-shirt, and then he's got a sport coat on with the pads on the elbows, and he's got this perm. He's got grayish hair. He's about 50 years old, about my age now, and he's got this perm, and it's all gray, and it's kind of long, and he don't look nothing like a police officer. Jesus. He hops out of this car, and I get out of the car. I get out of the Jeep too, and I remember going around to the driver's side of that car because he's parked against the curb the wrong way. Like you would normally park this way, well he's parked this way, like the driver is at the curb. And I look and he looked at me and I'd never seen such bloodshot eyes in my life. This kid, probably 18, I was only 19 or 20 at the time, maybe he was 17 or 18. But I call him a kid, but he was a kid and he was just trashed. And so Frank gets in front of the car, not completely in front of the car. He's on the grass, so he's off to the corner, off to the side of the front of the car, and he's got his gun out, and he's got his badge out. And he's pointing a gun at the kid, telling him, you know, don't move the car, get out of the car. And all I remember was hearing revving of the engine, and then a few seconds after the revving of the engine, he must have put it in drive and took off. Now, as this car is leaving, Frank unleashes 3 shots at him with this, it's a 22 he ends up having, and it's a revolver, and we'll get into that. How I know this, he fires 3 shots at this car at that point. This is 10 after 3 in the morning. I want to go home. He's shooting at people. So here we are, jump back in the car. Now the good thing is the lights are on from the rest of this ordeal. I have lights and I feel much better. And now I'm just kind of seeing what happens. We get in the car and we whip around and we end up on 14 Mile Road, because we're south of 14, and people that know this area will understand how we end up where we are. We end up on 14 and then we head east, and it's now a speedway, but speedways used to always be total gas stations. This was a total gas station on the corner of 14 and Drosdick. He gets out of the car there and the guy peels through the red light and he fires at him, I believe 3 more times there. Gets back in the car. So now we've had shots fired twice. We are in the car and we are steaming after him again, and we weave our way to this street called Utica. And Utica's a weird street because it's only 35 miles an hour and it cuts on an angle. And there's some weird lights like at Martin where they have an island like off to the side of it that's made of cement, and it like allows you the cars on that street to turn right. And I remember that island, and I know that's the street we were on, because that's where Frank, that guy was stopped up against that island. He's like in that right lane. There's a left lane and a right lane. They're not really lanes, but there's room for 2 cars. And Frank takes his Jeep, goes in front of it, and turns it into the car. So now we have an accident. He jams his Jeep into the car, trying to force its wheels into that island so it can't move. Now Frank's out of bullets. He tells me, find me a bullet. And this was before we even caught up to that car at this light. I'm reaching in there, and I didn't know he was after a 22. I'm pulling out 380, you know, the 3.8s and the 375s and the damn the 38s, the 9mm shells. I can't find a damn 22 anywhere in there. He reaches his hand in there when we stop, and he's got them jammed in there. Reaches his hand in and pulls out a 22, puts it in the gun, tells me, lean back, put your window down. So I lean back, I put my window down, and now I got his gun in my face as he's about to shoot this kid right in front of me. I'm going to have gunpowder and probably loss of hearing going on. Luckily, the kid managed to get his car. It was noisy, but he managed to accident his car up over the island and take off before that shot was fired. So we're on the chase again. We go through, I think we started out in Fraser-ish, and then we went through Roseville, and now we end up in St. Clair Shores. And St. Clair Shores, we're on Jefferson. This kid ends up on Jefferson. And Jefferson, you have 2 ways to go when you're heading south on Jefferson like he is in St. Clair Shores. You have to the right for land, and you have to the left for Lake St. Clair. You turn left, you are stuck, and he turned left. So we are all the way, we're probably 25 miles in a round trip from where we started chasing this kid. It's probably 3:30 in the morning now. We pull up into this circled, you know, dead-end drive because he turned left towards the lake. There's nowhere to go. Frank gets out of the car now. He is furious. And I'll never forget, he gets out of the car, gets the kid out of the car, gets the kid on the ground, tells him lay there, and tells him he's got a gun to his head. I'm sitting there hoping this gun just don't go off. He's got the gun to the back of the kid's head, yelling at him, the hammer. It's almost 4 in the morning. He's waking up houses yelling, the hammer is cocked, don't even fucking move. So the kid, I'll never forget this kid saying this. He says, can I move my leg just a little? Frank says, don't even. I told him, I didn't say anything, but I'm thinking to myself, don't fucking move, don't do anything. This guy is half off his mind right now. So thankfully, St. Clair Shores Police now, they show up about 5 minutes after we're there, and Frank's got this kid laying on the ground. And they come up, they arrest him, and now we got to go to the St. Clair Shores Police Station. They don't arrest us, they just have us drive up because we got to give our statements. So we drive up to the St. Clair Shores Police Station, and we all give our statements. And now it's like 5 in the morning as I'm getting out of this place. And we gave our statements, and now we head out. Well, like I said, there was more than one city involved in this. And one of them was Roseville. And Roseville took Frank's side. And they said, well, we don't want to prosecute him for anything. We want the kid prosecuted for drunk driving and a hit and run. St. Clair Shores was a different story. What ended up happening was when they looked at the car, they saw 2 of the shots had hit down by the wheel, down by where you would shoot the tire out. they found a dent right above the driver's head in the back stripping that goes on along your back windshield. And, you know, cops don't miss like that. If you're going to shoot like that, you're shooting at them. I mean, you're a cop. You know how to shoot a gun. So, because of that dent being above the kid's head in that back windshield, St. Clair Shores Police, and, you know, I think rightly so, they went ahead and wanted to charge Frank. I believe that the kid got off with some pretty low misdemeanor charges, and then Frank was going up for trial. And this is crazy in itself. So now St. Clair Shores is trying to get Frank for vigilante cop. Frank ends up getting himself a lawyer, and now I got to go talk to this lawyer. And this is a huge part of the story. I go to this lawyer, and we sit down and we're telling the story, and I'm telling them the very same story you just heard. And it's not a short story. It takes me a good 5 minutes to get through everything that happened along the line. And there's a reason I still remember everything, is because of how many times I had to tell this story. I sit down in this lawyer's office. Frank goes ahead and tells the story. Stenographer taking it, you know, because they're interviewing you for what happened. And that's his lawyer, so he's getting the information that's going to help Frank. So I go ahead and tell what happened. You go through and tell the whole thing, and there's one sentence that's different in my testimony than in Frank's. One sentence, and all that stuff I just told you, and I didn't even tell you the little bits and pieces in there of how this one sentence would go. But this one sentence is going to get Frank in trouble. Bad trouble. And his lawyer knows it. So I got this lawyer, I'm 20 years old, I got 19 or 20, I got this lawyer sitting there, and I tell my side of the story, and he stops and he looks at me and kind of gives me a look like, you know, I understood he didn't want me to say what I said. Makes me tell the story over again. Stenographer's still typing away. I tell the whole story again. He's mad now. Now we are going back and we are going to pinpoint that sentence that he wants me to change. And I think I told the whole story 3 times, and then we pinpointed the section that he had a problem with. So he asked me about that part, and I tell him what happened. And his face gets redder, and he tells me, you know, let's try this again. What happened during this part? And I tell him what happened again, and he's more red. This guy, he's a red-headed Italian, and his face is as red as his hair. I got him so mad. He turns to his stenographer and has her stop typing. Asks me again. I tell him again what I saw happen. He's even more mad. Probably 8 or 9 times this went on. Finally, you know, like I said, now I'm in this lawyer office twice as long as I should be, because I won't just tell him what he wants to hear. So finally, that's what ends up getting me out of the lawyer's office. I change my one sentence and tell him what he wants to hear and get the hell out of there. The one sentence was very big, and you know, I changed it there to get out of there. But I went home, and the first thing I did was told my girlfriend, I said, look, and I think she might have, yeah, she was my girlfriend at the time. I said, look, your dad's testifying. If they end up having me up there, I'm not lying for anybody, and your dad's going to be in trouble. So we got to court and sat there. A few people got in to testify. I'm the next one to go in. And Frank finally, last minute, gets the okay that he can plead no contest, keep his pension, and that's what he does, and I didn't end up having to testify. But you don't want to change something like that. It was a matter of where was Frank standing and what did the car do that led to the shots that I didn't agree, that wasn't what I saw. So he would have been in trouble if we would have went to court, because I don't mess around with law. I was brought up to tell the truth when you're dealing with the law. And you know, when you look at how our justice system is structured to supposed to work, it relies on people telling the truth. I'm not saying go out there and tell the truth if you're trying to keep yourself from getting in trouble. But you should never go ahead and, you know, change something up to try to help somebody else like that. That's just not right to do. And this would have made that kid look like he did something that he did not do. So it was a bad situation. And we get to the end of the story. I tried to look this thing up to see, because I don't know what they do with no contest cases. I can't find the case. It's a pretty big case as far as shootings and shit in the cities like that at 3 in the morning. But I can't find it. But the lawyer in this case, he's no longer got the red hair. but he's still in Michigan. He is now a representative, I think, to the State House. Yeah, Peter J. Lucido. I had that guy so mad you couldn't believe it. So yeah, that was my story of the only time I've really been afraid for my life. For that amount of time, we were doing 100 miles an hour with no lights on down a 30-mile-an-hour street. So that's the show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll be back in a couple days, because maybe a couple days, because I got to get you guys the tiger shark stats video out before we get into our next attack video, which will probably be a few days after that. So remember, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of these sharks than they are of you.